right, good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for your patience and your flexibility. This is kind of our first venture doing a program like this. So appreciate your time, energy, and efforts. Thanks for coming to Spring College Planning Night. We have several visitors virtually here with us from a variety of different types of schools. And the goal of the night really is just to kind of give you miniature overviews into some really key themes and topics as it relates to college search, college research, application, process, all of those things. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, but ladies, would you all like to just briefly kind of introduce yourselves, and then I'll kick it over to Elena. Would that work? Elena, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll mine.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. Well, my name is Elena Elgin. I am an admission counselor at Birmingham Southern College. I work with a lot of different students. I work with all of our international students, but then also students who reside outside of kind of the core continental United States.
My name is Marie Schofer, and I'm the Associate Director Admission at Cornell College in Iowa. And I've worked at Cornell now for 14 years. And I work with students, just like Elena, that are basically living outside of the 50 states. So international students, U.S. territories, those kinds of areas. So I'd be happy to tell you more about Cornell College, and I'm looking forward to this.
Ariana?
Yes. Hi, my name is Ariana Yaritu. I am an admissions counselor at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And I work with all students who are in the U.S. territories, the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, as well as New York City and Long Island. So really, really varied. And I'm regional, so you can see my apartment, and my cat is wandering around too. So
thank you. All right, Denise and Mia, hi.
Hi. So my name is Denise West Rosales. I am the Assistant Director here, Diversity Recruitment and Outreach, and one of my territories is actually the U.S. territories. So I'll be working with most of these students watching and the families. And I work at Simmons University. I should mention that.
Yep, that's right. I'm Mia Zilihi, also here at Simmons in Boston, and I am an admission counselor here, and I work with all of our international students.
Thank you. And Liz, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great and see you great. And I'm sorry, but I'm glad you kind of started rolling. We were waiting in our lobby to see if we could make sure parents knew where they were coming.
Awesome. So Liz is the one joining us over in Gift Hill, which is at St. John. Awesome. Well, Elena, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you for the first session of the evening.
Okay, wonderful. So I will just jump right in, and we are talking about making the most of high school. So I imagine all of you guys are at some point in the grades of 9 through 12. And thank you for coming. And I will really kind of get us started. If any questions arise, just know I'm happy to answer them as they pop up. But when we talk about making the most of high school, I think every college is really looking just to learn about you. I think a lot of times students can get so caught up in the process of, thinking about, oh my gosh, do I have everything in order? Do I have all the pieces of paper? What am I going to do? That sometimes they can forget that this process is really about telling your story and telling what you're passionate about and who you are to the different colleges you're applying to. So, I kind of, when I was outlining what to talk about, I kind of broke it down by grade. So, starting in ninth grade, which is traditionally in the United States when some schools start high school, some started in 10th grade, it just kind of depends. But ninth grade is really where you kind of want to survey the scene, see what your school has to offer, start getting involved. I'll speak specifically for Birmingham Southern. We're really passionate about community service. That's kind of something we're looking for when we look at applications, but every school is different. So I tell students when they're starting in ninth grade, find kind of find your niche in school, find something you're involved in, get involved in extracurriculars, find something outside of academics that kind of is what you're passionate about. Once you're moving into 10th and 11th grade, 11th grade more than 10th grade is where your test scores are going to kind of start to really pop in. You know, I think at least in the state of Alabama, which is where we're located, all of our juniors take the ACT for free in their high schools. So that's kind of when you can start looking at, okay, where are my ACT scores falling in line? Do I need to be improving them, moving up, moving down? Kind of where am I falling? Where is that going to put me? Begin looking towards college. I'm just referencing my notes. I promise I'm not looking at my phone. So that's kind of what I say for 11th grade. And then 12th grade is really where you begin, you know, okay, end of junior year, beginning of 12th grade year, where am I going to apply? And somebody's going to, you know, talk about finding your fit and all that stuff. So I won't dig into it. But I think the biggest piece for admission counselors, I get the question all the time is, what are you looking for? What should I be doing? You know, do I need to be involved in 900 clubs and organizations? And I always tell students, it is so dependent on you and your personality. If you are super passionately involved and really involved in one thing, that is awesome. If you want to be involved in a plethora of things, that is great. But just make sure that they are, you know, specific to you. I read resumes all the time where they're like, I'm involved in 75 different clubs. And that's awesome. But I think about, okay, are you actually invested in those 75 different clubs? You know, I personally would rather see a student that has, you know, 5 or 6 different involvements outside of school that they're really invested in, and they can talk specifically about those experiences and really how meaningful they are, how they've kind of shaped them as a person. At the same time, you do want to be involved outside of school and academics, but you don't want to let your extracurricular activities start negatively impacting your grades. Again, a lot of times we'll see students are really, really involved outside of school, and that is awesome, but their grades start taking a hit for it. And you do have to keep in mind, you know, when you are applying to college, that your grades, they do play a role in one way or another. So, you know, while it's important to be involved and be, you know, participating in whatever it is you're passionate about, don't let that negatively impact your grades. I've had some people be like, but you know, I'm involved in 85 different clubs and I'm the president of 60 of them. And that is awesome. But if you're not admissible to the school, then, you know, it can kind of become a detriment. So make sure you're finding a nice and even balance. And there's no specific formula to do that. It really is up to each and every student and the different schools that they're applying for. And, you know, the next kind of prompt I want to talk about is when it does come time to apply, a lot of people wonder, okay, you know, I'm applying to college. What do I do? How do I present myself? And this is where I, you know, really encourage students to submit either a letter of recommendation from a professor or a teacher or somebody that's involved in a club. I think those are huge in telling your story, telling, you know, what people think about you and how you're perceived, you know, getting a professor or letter or a teacher, excuse me, to write something saying, you know, they're great in class or anything like that, they're involved, is just gonna up your application that much more, as well as, always submit a resume. It's never going to hurt you. I don't, you know, I don't think saying this is what I'm involved in and what I'm passionate about. And then if you have the opportunity, if the college like literally our job, we want to talk to you. We want to get to know you. Way to, you know, put the right foot forward and say, hey, I want to take the time, do a Skype call, do an interview call. For those of us that work outside of the United States, we are also comfortable with working in different time zones and adjusting and figuring out and doing Skype. We really want to take the time to get to know you and what you're passionate about. And that can come off, you know, just so much more meaningful when you really get the opportunity to sit down and ask questions, even if it's through a Skype call. So, and, you know, my last piece advice, and then we can kind of open it to questions or whatever. but it's to remember that you're awesome. You know, when you apply to college, which is a huge deal, you should be really proud of yourself. Everybody brings something important to the table. And just finding a way to articulate that and make sure your counselor, your admission counselor knows how awesome you are is important. So don't feel bad about bragging about yourself, about saying, hey, yeah, I did this and it's awesome and I'm really proud of myself. That's important. We want to hear about that. We want to know about that and never be, you know, shy about it. Or if something happens and, you know, maybe your grades took a dive or there was something going on, please let us know. We are, I'll speak specifically for our college because I'm not going to put every college into that blanket, but we really do, you know, if your grades took a dive and there was something going on, we want to know what happened. We really are there. So when you're applying to colleges, just remember to be honest and to be yourself. You know, like I said, everybody that applies is awesome. I bet everybody in that room is awesome. You guys have worked really hard by the time you apply to college. And as counselors, we want nothing more than for you guys to be successful wherever you decide to go. So don't be shy about putting your best foot forward. Just remember to bring your most, you know, authentic self. When you write your essay, make sure to write about you while writing about your grandmother or your trip you went on is super cool. That doesn't tell counselors anything about you. So remember to write about you, write about what you're passionate about, write about your extracurriculars or your involvement, even if it's just one thing you're super involved and super passionate about. That's what we want to hear. We want students, I think just higher education in general, want students that are passionate about what they do, whether that is AP classes or the geology club or Spanish club or whatever it is. We want to know what you're passionate about, and that's kind of what we kind of want. So my piece of advice is, you know, take a deep breath and do you in some sense of the word. You know, make sure that you are doing things that are fulfilling you and not just filling up 5 pages on a resume. We really want to know as admission counselors about you as an individual. So as you go through high school, yeah, get involved, be involved outside of class, but also as you begin the application process, make sure you're talking to your counselor. I totally understand some students too, they have to work part-time jobs outside of school. They can't be super involved. So just make sure you're fulfilling and filling in your counselor as you go along when you apply to college, and try and as you move through high school, when opportunities arise, to take them, be involved in what you can. And then when it comes time to present yourself, be proud of what you've done. That's kind of my advice. And Kara, I mean, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I know we want to kind of keep a timetable to move on to the next thing.
Okay. Seems like we don't have any questions for now.
We do. We have one question, if we can.
Sure.
We're wondering about kids doing interviews, and obviously remotely, lots of our kids are not able to make the trip, you know, to go on campus and interview wherever. And we find that it's not always easy to find local reps. Mm-hmm. And, you know, not every school will be able to send someone down. So could you tell us a little bit about your process for kids who can't come to campus, don't have a rep close by? How can they go about arranging, or is it even important, arranging a chance to do some kind of video or phone interview?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak specifically for my school, and if the other counselors want to jump in, that's totally fine for how they do them. Because I am the only counselor in our office that works with students outside of the 50 states, at any point, you can get my email address. I have even a page on our website where you can literally go and schedule a time to do a Skype call with me. And that's set around my calendar, and it adjusts for time zones and all of that stuff. And literally you just schedule yourself in and I will give you a call at any point of the day. I have WhatsApp. If my WhatsApp phone number is attached to all of my emails, so students can literally click on that and then just send me a message saying, hey, I want to do an interview or find a time to talk or something along those lines. If a student is ever outside the 50 states, I make it a personal point to reach out and say, hey, let's find a time to talk. Let's find a time to just do a Skype call just so you can know me, I can know you, and we can make that connection. So that's a policy personally I uphold, and every school does it differently, but it's very easy to get an interview with a counselor. That is what we're here to do, is to connect, and every school does it differently, but that's just the way we kind of handle it here at Birmingham Southern.
All right, thank you so much, Elena, for your time. FYI to everybody who's here with me, and then also to Liz's group, this is fully recording. So if at any part, the beginning gaps, anything like that, I can certainly send it out for future or forever reference, really. So thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Marie for session 2. So she's going to talk a little bit about researching colleges and specifically finding your fit.
Okay, and I am going to try to share some slides. So let me know if this is working. Yeah. Do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, you still see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So as I said before, my name's Marie, and I'm with Cornell College in Iowa, not to be confused with Cornell University in New York, totally separate school. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the college search and how to find a school that's the best fit. I also am going to talk a little bit about test optional colleges, as well as alternative to the traditional semester calendar. There are colleges out there that don't have a traditional calendar like ours, and I just want to make sure that students, parents in the room, I just want to expose you to different options, not trying to just sell Cornell. I know that our schedule is not for everybody, but I want to make sure that you're aware of all the different possibilities out there. So first of all, when I think about the college search, I think the first thing that students need to do is do some self-reflection. So I put on this slide some questions that are good questions to ask yourself as you're starting this college search. I know that at age 17 or 18, you may not know exactly who you are. I mean, I knew that I grew a lot during college. I'm a very different person now than I was at age 17. But at that point, I was trying my best to think about, where will I be successful in college? What kind of environment will be good for me? And there are a lot of factors to think about. So I thought that these questions might kind of help you start that brainstorming process. What about your high school experience have you really enjoyed? And what have you not enjoyed as much? What are you looking for in college that might be different? What kind of classroom setting do you enjoy? Because typically at a larger school, you might be in larger lecture halls more frequently than you would be at a small college. Different people have different preferences about class sizes. What experiences in high school, in academics, have you been most successful? Have you enjoyed the most? And then you can go into your college search thinking, where can I have those kinds of experiences again? So there's a few questions to think about. Here's a few more. Do you have a sense of what you want to study? It's okay to still be deciding. You don't have to have this all figured out right now. But maybe there are a few areas that you're thinking about. Maybe you know that you like the sciences more than you like the humanities, or vice versa. That can help you sort of start to narrow things down. And then you should also consider your extracurricular activities. If you are really passionate about ultimate frisbee, make sure that as you're doing your college search, you are looking at schools that have ultimate frisbee. I think it's okay to think about extracurricular activities, because those are things that help you become a well-rounded person. They help fill you out. They help you to enjoy, every day is doing those things that you're passionate about. And then it's good to think about your strengths and your weaknesses and be really honest with yourself about that. Doing self-reflection is not always an easy thing, but I think it's a really critical part of the college search. So as you can see, I do think that college guidebooks can be useful, but that's not where I want you to start. I would advise you to start by answering some of these questions and thinking about where you feel, where is your comfort zone, and where are places where you want to push out of that comfort zone and maybe try something new. So with that in mind, I'm kind of going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. Narrow your search, but also keep an open mind. What do I mean by that? Well, what are the non-negotiables? If you absolutely want to fulfill a geology major in college, you can eliminate a lot of colleges that don't have a geology major. That's a great starting point. Now, all of a sudden, you have narrowed your search. And maybe you have to have an ultimate Frisbee club. Well, okay, that's going to narrow things down even a little bit further. But maybe you're not sure whether you want to go to a large or a small school. So keep an open mind about that and maybe apply to research and maybe visit schools that are both large and small. I know personally in my own search, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I had no idea anything about college, doing a college search. And I kind of knew that. I knew that I didn't even know what I didn't know, if that makes sense. So what I started by doing was I visited all the local colleges in St. Louis, even though I felt like it was important for me to go away for college. I wanted to have that residential experience. I wanted to become more independent. I felt like I needed to do that just for my own personal growth. And so I visited all the local schools and I started to kind of gravitate towards smaller schools. And so then when I started to do research outside of the St. Louis area, I knew I could focus my search on smaller colleges. It's okay to ask for help. I know that sometimes we try to be strong and say, we got this, I know what I'm doing, I don't need to ask for help. But a college search is a personal process, but it's also one that's pretty big and can be overwhelming at times. And so it's okay to reach out to people and ask for help. Make sure you're meeting with your school counselor. They are a wealth of information. Talk to your teachers about where they went to school and what their experiences were like. Ask friends, family, and others that you know, but take everything with a grain of salt too, because that's their experience. That's not necessarily going to be your experience. But again, you've got resources around you, to people you can talk to. Other resources that I would recommend, yes, the big giant, 6-inch high guidebooks, they can be kind of intimidating, but they're a great place to just get general information about colleges, find out, what their majors are, what the size of the school is, where are they located. Those are all going to be factors you have to consider. Go ahead and go to the college and university websites. Again, keep in mind that that's their marketing, but it is interesting to see how colleges market themselves and what you can see what they feel is important in the way that they market themselves. And you can see, do those interests or values line up with what you're looking for in a college? The use of United States Department of Education College Navigator website is a great place to also just get general information about colleges. And it's all based on data that is collected in a similar manner at all colleges. So you can really feel like you're comparing apples to apples when you look at that website. Another one that I want to talk about is called fairtest.org. There are something like 900 colleges now that do not require students to submit test scores to gain admission. And during your self-reflection time, if you were thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and you said standardized testing is a weakness, you might want to go to fairtest.org and take a look at the colleges that are listed there to see ones that you might be able to apply to without a test score. So that's a great resource. And I will talk about a little more about test optional admission in a minute here. Another website that I think is really phenomenal, but I'm totally biased, is ctcl.org, Colleges That Change Lives. Colleges That Change Lives is an organization that actually came about because of a book that was written by a man named Loren Pope. Loren Pope worked for the New York Times as an education editor, and he, for many years, would promote all these top-ranked universities through the newspaper. But then he started to realize that there were some small little schools out there that were doing very, very well with their students on things like the LSAT scores and MCAT scores. These students were scoring really high, and they were going on to do really great things. But who had ever heard of some of these small colleges? So I believe Lauren was in his 70s or 80s when he took his wife and did a cross-country trip around the United States to take a look at some of these smaller colleges that really had some high-profile things to brag about, high-profile alumni and research and things like that. And what he wound up doing is writing a book about 40 colleges that he termed colleges that change lives. Small places that are very student-centered, and because of that student focus, they really help students to grow and blossom and excel post-college. Cornell College is a member of Colleges That Change Lives, as well as Birmingham Southern. So hi, Elena, good to see you here. But there's 40 plus schools now in the CTCL organization, and it's a great resource. There are places you can go on the CTCL website that give advice about the college search, and it's really practical stuff, like how parents and students can work together without completely stressing each other out about the college search. So I would definitely encourage you to check out that website as well. As I mentioned, I was going to talk a little bit about test optional admission. So there are a lot of schools out there now that do not require you to submit a test score to gain admission. Some do not require a test score for scholarship consideration either. And Cornell College actually falls into that category. If you don't feel like your ACT or SAT is an accurate reflection of your abilities as a student, you may want to consider a test optional college. So there's a couple different terms that I want to make sure are clarified. One is test blind. There are some schools that literally do not accept test scores for any applicant. They want to make admissions decisions solely on transcripts, recommendation letters, essays, things like that. Other colleges are test optional. You can make the choice of whether you submit a test score or not. And also some of these schools will require you to do something in place of that test score. So again, I can speak to my own college because we do this. Instead of sending in your test score, you are required to submit a personal portfolio. And this can be a million different things. It could be an art portfolio with a writing sample of why you're submitting art to us. Why do you think that that's a good thing to send to us in place of a test score? Or it could be an academic research paper you did for school, or a photo journal that you have, or reflections on an internship experience, or just about anything. I mean, we really try to leave it open-ended so that students can be creative and show us who they are in their own words, in their own way. And then, like I said before, some colleges that are test optional may require a test score to be considered for scholarships. So you'll have to research this with each individual college that you look at, but fairtest.org will give you that full list of all schools that are in some way test optional or test blind. Okay, so then the last topic that I'm going to talk about, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about traditional college calendars versus non-traditional college calendars, and a few of the advantages to each of those. So a traditional college calendar looks like what I have up on the screen. You're taking 4 courses in the fall, 4 in the spring. You may actually take 5. I went to a semester-based college, and I took 5 classes each semester pretty much up until my senior year when I backed down to 4. But you're taking these classes simultaneously, so you're doing a bit of a juggling act, and you do have 4 or 5 exams then at the end of each semester. But some students like to have that variety, and I know that it was fun at times when I could make connections between the different classes I was taking. I felt like I was truly having a liberal arts experience when I could connect my, women's studies class to my Islamic activism class to whatever history class I was taking. It was kind of fun to make those connections. Another option is a January or May term. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as J term or Maymester. The January term looks like this. It's typical semesters with 1 class kind of squished in between in January. So students typically will take the fall semester, go on winter break, come back in January for a class that may be 2 weeks, as short as 2 weeks or as long as 6 weeks, where it's just 1 class. And then they go into their spring semester where they're taking 4 or 5 classes in the spring. The benefit of doing a class like this is that you've got 1 class where you can just dive in and really focus on a subject. the professor is usually only teaching one class during that time period, so they're just as invested in the class as you are. And sometimes they have to be smaller, and they tend to be maybe more hands-on or interactive, maybe even involve travel, field trips, on-campus or off-campus study, both domestic and international. So there's a lot of flexibility in that J term. And like I said, there is also the May term option, so it just means that extra class is tacked on at the end of the year rather than in the middle. So I did want to just point out there's quite a few colleges around the country. This is not an exhaustive list, it just is kind of what I came up with during my research. Each college does a little bit differently too. Some of these the Jan term classes could be as short as 2 weeks, some as long as 6 weeks. Some colleges seem to really focus it on courses that you can take, and others are more focused on making it an internship or research opportunity or travel. I know Center College in Kentucky seemed to really focus on the travel element. Birmingham Southern, you guys had a neat name. It was E-term or exploration term. So again, students, as you go through, do your research, if you like the idea of doing a J term or a May term, these are some colleges you might want to take a look at. Another option is trimesters. Trimesters means you're taking 3 semesters throughout the year, one in the fall, one in the winter, and one in the spring, and you're only taking 3 classes at a time. So a little bit less to juggle than the traditional semester. These semesters tend to be 10 weeks long, which is a little shorter than your traditional semester. And another unique thing about the way the calendar works is you take the fall semester in the traditional fall, then it ends right around Thanksgiving, and you have Thanksgiving to basically the new year off. So it's a really long winter break where you're off about 6 weeks, and then you come back in January and you've got the winter semester followed by the spring semester. And typically students are in class until about mid-June. So the school year winds up being a little bit longer with some of the semester schools. But again, the benefit is fewer classes to juggle, fewer exams at the end of each of these semesters, and a little more ability to focus on individual classes. Okay, and then I just wanted to put a few trimester institutions up here, really great named schools up here as well. So they're all over. Okay, next I wanted to talk about these modified block calendars. Cornell College operates on a very traditional block calendar, and I'll show that to you in a minute, but I found both Spalding University and Hastings had really interesting structures for their academic calendar. Spalding, during the traditional academic year, has 5 sessions. Each of these sessions is 6 weeks long, and students can choose to take 1 or 2 classes in each session. So I liked the flexibility of that because I thought, oh my goodness, if I ever had to take like a really tough class, like for me, organic chemistry would have been super tough. I might have chosen to only take that during a session, and then the next session taken 2 classes. So there's some interesting flexibility there. And they also offered 2 sessions in the summer. So it's a total of 7 of these sessions throughout the year. You actually get a week break in between each session. So trying to cover a lot of material in 6 weeks can sometimes be a little intense. So it's nice to have a little break to recharge and reset and then get back onto the next class the next week. Hastings College, their methodology was to do 2 classes during a 7-week period, a little mini class, 2-week class in the middle, just 1, and then 2 more classes for a 7-week session. That consists of a semester for them. So it's 2, 1, 2 in a semester, and then they do that in the next semester as well. Again, with both of these setups, you're going to have potentially more flexibility in your course registration because you can turn on a dime. It's not like you have to wait to the end of the semester to make changes to your schedule. If you take a psychology class because you think you're going to be a psychology major, but then you decide, oh no, I didn't know what this was about. I don't want to do this anymore. You can switch out of those classes that you may have scheduled the very next session or the session after that. So there's a lot of flexibility, and there could be more opportunity for hands-on things during these schedules because you're only taking a few number of classes, 1 or 2 classes. Okay, so then kind of what I would term as being the most traditional block calendar is literally one course at a time. So this is what Cornell's calendar looks like. For 3.5 weeks, you're only taking one class. Students typically attend class for 3 or 4 hours a day. It's usually like 9 to 11 in the morning and 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And after that, activities on campus take place. At the end of the 3.5 weeks, they take one final exam because that's the only class they're taking. And then they get a 4-day weekend before they start the next class. So again, you get that immersion experience in each subject and a lot of flexibility in how the professors teach the class, because that's the only class you're taking. So if you go on a field trip, no one's going to miss you on campus, and then you just come right back. We've even had classes that study off campus abroad. So about 20 classes, 20 to 25 a year will go on extended trips. Could be as far as 3.5 weeks in New Zealand or 2 weeks doing research in the Bahamas. That takes place in February, so it's very popular. Although you guys already know that, but for us up in Iowa, it's a big deal. So just a different way of doing things. And then I like visual aids. So this is kind of a comparison of how our block works with classes sequentially versus the semester where they're all at the same time. And then I wanted to point out that while there are not as many of us, there are a few block plan schools around the country and around the world. So there are lots of options out there. And I hope that by showing you these different calendars, I've kind of opened your eyes to yet another factor or possibility that you have to consider. But I think it really illustrates how each college has its own personality, its own way of doing things. And I don't believe there's only one college that's the perfect college for you, but there's certainly ways that you could find a college that's going to be a good fit for you academically, meet your needs, meet your extracurricular interests, all the way around. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
Marie, in my group, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay.
But that was really, really great, especially like the visuals. Like there's so many options out there, but if you just kind of organize, the way that you like to learn, the way that you like to be successful through your day, finding something that's right for you. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Question? Oh, we got a question. Yeah. Forever and always. Yeah. The question was just about the recording. So yes, it's available to everybody. Awesome. Thanks so much, Marie.
You're welcome. Thanks.
All right. Okay, Ariana, I'm going to turn it over to you. Great. Let me find you.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
One question.
Yeah.
Just going back to the last slide where it showed international question, university in Canada, I think university in Australia, but I also wanted to know in terms of the recognition across America with respect to these international universities. Could you shed some light on that?
As far as recognition.
Recognizing the degrees.
Oh, gotcha. For an international school.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Marie, did you catch that question? Just as far as how a degree from an international school might be recognized once a student might return to the States for like work or opportunities in that way.
Well, that's a good question. I know that the students that I work, the international students that I work with who wind up graduating from Cornell and then going perhaps back home, that they find that having a degree from a U.S. institution can actually be a big bonus. Now, going the other way around, I don't have as much experience with that so much, but I think it would kind of depend on the employer and what they're looking for. I know for us, I know personally in my own hiring process, I was the director at Cornell for 7 years before I switched into my new role. And when I would go through hiring, yes, there is something to be said about where people go to school, but it's so much more about how they present themselves on a resume and what experiences that they've had and how they can communicate how those experiences will help them in that job. So, one of the things that I love about what we're doing at Cornell, we actually developed a new curriculum. It's called Ingenuity, and it's really designed to help students understand yeah, you're taking this history course outside of your major, but why are we having you do this? Well, because it's going to give you certain skills, and we try to articulate those skills rather than just skills. This is a quantitative course. We want you to gain quantitative skills. What they did at Cornell and what their college experience was like, they can say, I've had these experiences and they could help me in the work that you need me to do for this job. I know that doesn't completely answer your question, so. Sorry.
No, thank you. And something else I would add too, so NACAC, which is like a giant, large, overarching, it's called National Association of College and Admissions Counselors. They put out a guide to international admissions. It's a very extensive guide. So I'm happy to share that with you and do a little bit of digging myself, as I would imagine there's kind of a full circle of, now that you've gone through this process, what are those implications moving forward? They do a very extensive thing specifically in regard to international schools. So we can likely find some more resources as well. Good question.
You said it was NACAC.
Yeah, I'll write it on the board called NACAC. I'll write it for you. Yeah. Other questions?
Just a comment on
Please.
her question. I think you have to look at your degree. So my particular profession, when I became a degree license, you have to look at the requirements of specifically the U.S. credit. It's just a specific.
Yeah, everything's so easy one-offs. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, Marie, thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thanks. Let's see. Ariana?
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Yes, thank you. So again, my name is Ariana Yadidu. I'm from Vanderbilt University, but today I'm going to be talking more generally about holistic admission and what that means for how applications are read at certain schools. So when you're looking at schools that you're applying to, there will be different ways that they practice admissions. So there will be some schools that are open entry where anybody who wants to attend that school and applies is welcome to come and join their community. There will be some schools that operate based on like minimums where you have to have a minimum ACT or SAT and a minimum GPA, and then you're welcome to join their community. And then based on that, you'll often also see that they have like grids where they'll show if you have this SAT and this GPA, then you're guaranteed admission. But if you have this higher SAT and GPA, then you're guaranteed a $5,000 a year scholarship. And it's very formulaic for those schools. And then there are schools that practice holistic admissions, which means that as they're evaluating applications, they're taking a lot of different factors into account as part of that process. And typically the biggest factors that are going to be taken into account as part of that process are going to be your academic record, test scores, letters of recommendation, extracurricular activities, and essay. There are some other schools that will also include things like an interview or demonstrated interest, and we'll talk about all these factors in a second, but just really want to give you an overview of what that holistic admissions term does tend to mean. It means that we are hoping to get a sense of who you would be beyond just the numbers and who you would be when you're joining our community and coming onto our campus. So for schools like Vanderbilt that do practice holistic admissions, the goal really is to evaluate each of these different pieces with something different in mind, again, to get a sense of who you'd be. So starting at the top, for most of the schools, the beginning evaluation of your application is going to start by looking at your academic record. So it's going to, when your counselor submits all the pieces of the application, you submit all your pieces of the application, there'll be two things that we're going to be looking at primarily as part of that academic review. Your counselor will submit what is called a school profile, where they will tell us what was available to you at your school, what kind of curriculum you practice, and if that is a curriculum that is specific to your school, an international curriculum like the International Baccalaureate or the Advanced Placement curriculum, If you did all honors classes, whatever it might be, that school profile lists all of those different factors out for us so we can get a sense of what was available to you at your school. The other piece that will help us evaluate your academic experience is the transcript. So your individual transcript, which will tell us what classes you decided to take and how well you did within those classes. We do want to see typically that you have challenged yourself appropriately, that you have tried to maximize your learning opportunities, especially in the things that you're interested in. And so we'll be looking at those two pieces in conjunction to evaluate your academic fit. Yes, schools do want to see, and like Alana was saying, that you've done well in your classes and you challenge yourself, but we do really stress that challenging yourself appropriately. Sometimes people will ask, well, is it more important for me to take the most advanced classes and get Bs, or to take the regular class and get an A? It's really sort of a balance of the two of those things. You want to be challenging yourself, but not putting yourself in a position where you're not going to be able to show your academic strength and your ability to succeed academically. So that's really that first piece. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of schools that are doing holistic admissions, that are looking at it more on an individual basis, might have some recommended curriculum that they offer, and might not have some recommended curriculum that they offer, curriculum that they recommend that you've taken. This is really dependent on you to research what the different schools that you're looking at require or don't require, or have minimums or don't have minimums. From Vanderbilt's perspective, we do not have any kind of minimum GPA. We don't have any kind of recommended curriculum either. It's really based on what you've done within what was offered to you. Another piece of the holistic review process is going to be looking at your test scores if the school requires them. So most schools are going to be looking primarily at the SAT or the ACT. Really incumbent again on you to research the different schools and see what they require, or if they have a preference. Marie already mentioned schools that are test optional or test flexible, where you might not have to submit an SAT or ACT at all, or they'll take some kind of other set of exams instead of requiring an SAT or ACT. So different schools will do different things, but schools that do require the SAT or ACT, it's meant to serve as a means to sort of level the playing field. So we have one common metric that every student in the applicant pool has taken, so that we can really get a sense of where you fall within that space as well. Largely the academic record, the transcript, and the test scores, those are the really numbers-based parts of your application, really where we can see in sort of raw data how you've performed and in that academic space. But for schools that are practicing holistic admissions, we're looking at you beyond just the academics. You want to really get a sense of your personality, your point of view, what you would bring to our campus. So we're looking a lot more at the other very qualitative pieces of your application as well. So the letters of recommendation is a big qualitative piece that schools use to really see how to begin to picture you on their campus. Most schools will all require a letter from your counselor, and that counselor letter tends to be more of a broad overview of you within the context of your school. So if there's anything noteworthy about your school's curriculum, or what curriculum you chose while within your school, if there's anything noteworthy about your family circumstances, your extracurricular activities, typically that counselor letter will give us that information. It does tend to be a higher level overview of you within your school, though. Often schools will also require letters of recommendation from an academic teacher. Most schools are going to consider that academic letter to be coming from one of your core subject area teachers. So math, science, history, English, or foreign language tend to be what we would consider the academic areas. The goal of these academic letters of recommendation really is to learn more about, how you work with others in the classroom and how you respond to setbacks or challenges, and really what your academic philosophy or goals are and how you met those within those different classroom settings. And all of that together will come from those academic letters of recommendation. When you're thinking about who you'd like to ask those academic letters of recommendation, and there's a couple different things to keep in mind. One, you do want to be asking for your letters sooner rather than later. So if you are a junior right now in your 11th grade year or 10th grade year, you want to be thinking early on, because your teachers will have several different letters, if not, in the tens of letters to write for you and for your classmates. So the more time that you give them the better quality letter that they typically can, and sit down and take the time to write for you. And that typically will tend to be how that works. So if you give a teacher, 3 months, you're giving them the request in August for a November 1st deadline. And that teacher has a lot of time to really sit down and think critically, maybe look at some of your older work or essays. That letter will tend to be pretty different versus a letter that you ask for like October 15th, or giving your teacher 2 weeks. That letter would be different from a letter that you asked for on October 25th for a November 1st deadline. So all different things to keep in mind on that front. Another thing is that you want to think about really where your academic journey was in the classroom with that teacher. So if you had a class that was a really natural strength, that you came into math and have been ahead in math for your entire academic career, and really that is where you come alive and you find a lot of strength and a lot of joy, then absolutely feel free to have your math teacher send a letter of recommendation on your behalf. But we often encourage students not to discredit the teacher. This class was not your natural strength, that you maybe had to work a little bit harder. You really had to move through different challenges and grew from that experience. And oftentimes that can also be a really, really positive letter of recommendation and powerful letter of recommendation, because wherever you end up, it is very, very likely that you will have moments of setbacks in college, if that's academic or social or cultural, whatever it might be. And we want to know as admissions professionals that you know how to ask for help, you know how to seek out assistance, and that you're able to move forward and grow from those setbacks that you might encounter on our campuses as well. So the letters of recommendation really give us an opportunity to see you from a different perspective, and begin to think more about what voice and perspective you'd bring to our classrooms and community as a whole. Another big piece of the holistic review process is looking a lot at your extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities, as was already mentioned earlier, that really helps us to see what you care about, what you like doing, what you've decided to dedicate your time to doing, and what excites you, what you want to continue to do on our campus. It is absolutely important, like Marie mentioned, that if you have an extracurricular activity that is really, really crucial to your identity and has brought you a lot of joy, you are looking for that kind of activity on a college campus that you're wanting to attend. But from the admissions perspective, we're not necessarily looking to fill specific extracurricular activities when we're reading applications. So that being said, there's nothing that we particularly ask to see or hope to see when reading your application. There are different schools that do have different priorities. Someone mentioned their school is super, super focused on service. They'd like to see that as part of your extracurricular activities. Different schools don't have that same kind of expectation. They just want to that you.
Haley, is that you? If so, will you go on mute? Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Wherever Haley is, I need to mute her. Go here. Here she is. Here. All right.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Great. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. I was just like hearing myself on loop over and over again. Okay, so we were talking about extracurricular activities. Really just do what you'd like to do, but make sure that you are comfortable talking about that within your application. When you're filling out the forms themselves, my biggest piece of advice really is for you to think about what has been the most impactful for you and sort of rank it in reverse order. So most impactful first, and then second most, third most, as we're going through that list. Typically, we do like to see two things as part of your extracurricular activities, leadership and longevity, so that you have some things you've dedicated yourself to over a couple of years, and also that you have some level of responsibility within the groups that you are a part of. So you don't have any kind of expectation that you are the president of all 5 groups that you're part of. We want you to be able to dedicate naturally and dedicate yourself fully to what you take on as part of the extracurricular activities. But we do like to see that in some of your organizations and some of your groups, you do have some level of responsibility, that you really have dedicated yourself to that endeavor. And that could be things like being the president or the vice president, but then also things like being the service chair or the section leader. Maybe you run the fundraiser every year, whatever it might be for your different organization, that you have taken the time to dedicate yourself to some of those activities. Another thing to also keep in mind, especially at schools like Vanderbilt, is that that are admitting by school. So at Vanderbilt, we have 4 different undergraduate schools. You apply to one of them. Oftentimes, we do appreciate seeing you have done some kind of academic exploration with your extracurricular activities as well, meaning that if you are interested in politics and you're part of Model UN at your school, that's great. If you're interested in science and you're on the Science Olympiad team, things like that are really, really great to see that you've spent some time exploring those different interests, especially at a school, at a university where we are admitting by undergraduate program or school. Definitely something just to keep in mind as well. And then the last piece that most schools will typically evaluate as part of their holistic review is the essay. The essay is a chance where you really have an opportunity to share your voice and your perspective as part of the admissions process. Really, when you're thinking about it, a lot of what you're going to be filling out yourself is things like where your address and your parents' information and where they went to school and what classes you took and what extracurriculars you're part of. Not a lot of time for you to really put that voice and perspective in. So that essay really gives you that window to be able to show us how you think, how you react to things, what has made an impact in your life, what has been some of the things that have brought you the most joy, or really helped you to form your perspective of the world and what you would be bringing to our campus as well. People write their essays about all sorts of things. There is not one topic that we appreciate seeing more or less. And what we really appreciate seeing more than anything is that you have taken the time to really reflect and think about yourself and how you move through the world and how you want to continue to move through the world in the future. I really have read essays about all sorts of things, written in all sorts of formats, whether that is in a traditional sort of different paragraphs with a beginning and an end, and so really a takeaway for us to have. And I've read essays that have been written as poems. I've read essays that have been written in the form of an interview between the student and their hometown newspaper 20 years in the future. Really, however you'd like to get your point across, feel free to do so. If you are creative and you want to be creative with this, if you're funny, be funny, and all of those things hold true in this essay because it really is meant for you to share a part of yourself with us. That's going to be sort of the main personal statement that you'll send to all the different schools that you're applying to. And when you apply to multiple schools, if you use a portal like the Common Application or the Coalition Application, you'll have like the main body of the application that you fill out, that you send to every single school you apply to. And depending on the different schools you'd like to apply to, if that's 5 different schools, you'll have to fill out a supplement that you'll send to each of the individual schools. So whatever you fill out for the University of Tennessee, you would not also submit to Vanderbilt. But on that university-specific supplement, that they might have some additional essays there as well. Oftentimes there are essays that will ask you why such and such university, what attracted you to our student body or our community, what are you going to bring specifically to our institution. That's one typical type of supplement essay. Another really common one is to do more of like an intellectual exercise. I'm thinking about, There's one school that asks you to just like fill the box. There'll be schools that will ask you, you know, who would you most like to have dinner with in the world? If you could change one thing about your community, or what would it be? Things like that that are more sort of cerebral, that have a specific thing they'd like you to respond to. And so you'd want to keep all of that in mind as well when you're thinking about the number of essays that you have to write, because it can sort of begin to pile up, and you want to be proactive and give yourself lots of time to fill out all the different application pieces and write all those different essays for the different schools that you are applying to. So just as a recap, the holistic review process, we're looking at lots of different pieces, using them all to inform our understanding of you as an individual and who you would be on our campus community.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to get started. So like we said, my name is Denise Hueso Rosales.
Yep, and I'm Mia Zillahi here at Simmons University
in Boston. So we're going to be talking about financial aid. So we do want to specify that we are not financial aid advisors. So we're going to cover a bunch of topics, but if there's any questions that come up that are like very specific, we always recommend talking to each school's financial aid advisor. We can get started. Yeah.
Just to give you a little bit of context of who we are and where we're from, we're coming to you from Simmons. We are right in the heart of Boston in the Fenway area. We are a women-centered institution. So what that means is at the undergraduate level, we are predominantly female, although we do serve trans, non-binary, and non-gender conforming students as well. And then our graduate programs are co-ed. But just a little bit of context before we jump into this, we'll be going over types of financial aid, financial fit for you guys, and negotiating your package. We're going to give a broad overview. It's not just about Simmons, it's about all institutions in general.
Yeah. So just to start off with scholarships, which is everyone's favorite topic. So we're going to highlight institutional and outside scholarships. So just defining what merit-based and need-based are and how they're different. So merit-based is typically brought about academic profile and academic merit. So schools will be looking at a lot of academics of the students, so transcripts, their test scores, and such and so forth. So that's kind of where merit-based is based out of. Need-based is different in that it's more of family need and family income. So dependent on the forms that you submit and such, that it really depends and can differ on what is defined as need-based, dependent on family need, essentially. And outside scholarships, so this is a broad term. So outside scholarships really embody scholarships that your schools might provide to your student, regional scholarships within the Virgin Islands or any area in which you're a part of. And these can also be incorporated into some institutions when you're looking at trying to pay off school and your bill, essentially. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that we actually are highlighting, to use an example of what merit-based scholarships could look like, the Simmons merit-based scholarship. So the amount that's circled, basically all our first-year students, we give all our first-year students scholarships, which range from $18,000 to $27,000 a year. And the terms that are underlined are the names of those scholarships. So they're a number dependent on the amount that you receive.
And just one other note about outside scholarships, most colleges and institutions that you're looking at will have a list of resources for you within their scholarship page. There's a lot of great resources on websites, but just be wary of what you're clicking on. Make sure to never apply for a scholarship that requires you to give them money forth. But yeah, there's wonderful things out there. I know the Virgin Islands has one, and there's certainly different things that you might not know about that have to do with your affinity groups and just things to research outside of what you might be earning from the colleges that you're applying to.
Yeah, if you ever have to pay for a scholarship, don't do that. I don't recommend doing that. Some of them are scams. Make sure you're doing your research and really seeing that those are real, but it doesn't really make sense to pay to get money, right. You know. So just think about that if those things come up.
And then we're going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA application. So for students who are citizens or permanent residents, you have the option to apply through the free application for federal student aid. What that is free application online. You'll need both your parent and your student to create an FSA ID and a profile to complete your application. From there, they've made it much more simple. They have the access to your IRS records, and they're using your tax information from prior year. So what that means is they're going to look at your family's income from 2 years ago and use that to calculate your family's expected contribution. That you'll hear a lot of offices use, financial aid, your admission counselors. That's what the federal government has determined that your family can absorb. Normally, families think of it as something they're expected to pay up front, but you don't have to have that money all up there. Families often get worried when they first see that number that it's larger than they anticipate, but that's how it just starts. And now the application is now open in October. It used to be opened later in the year. Each institution and college that you apply to will have its own priority deadline. So every college you're looking at will have that listed of when they have the most funds available. So just to keep that in mind while you're looking at application deadlines, also look at their FAFSA priority deadlines. If you're applying for financial aid, just keep an eye on those. The earlier you put that in, obviously the better. And that being said, I lost my train of thought. That being said, you can add 10 institutions onto your FAFSA application. So you can actually submit your FAFSA application before your student has submitted their full application to the college that they're applying to, just so we have that on hand. Yeah. Do you want to talk about this? Sure. So how an institution will determine your financial need, they will use that EFC number that FAFSA has provided, and they'll subtract that from the general cost of attendance. Cost of attendance we'll speak about in a little bit does encompass more than just tuition. I think students often are told, like, this is just our tuition, but it also encompasses fees, unexpected fees, like travel, obviously for people who are interested in traveling to the mainland for college, as well as books, things of that nature, room and board, all those good things.
So just kind of what Mia was talking about, this is a breakdown. So I'm just going to put it out there. These are made up numbers. They're not based on any institution. They're not based off ours. We just made these numbers up. But essentially, we made up these numbers from like other private institutions that we've looked at. But like Mia was mentioning, this would be the total cost when encompassing tuition, which when they do say when advertised, some schools do advertise it as $50,000 a year. It is split up into 2 semesters dependent on kind of like the rundown of each institution, like we mentioned earlier. Each institution's different, but we base it on fall and spring semesters. Fees, so those are fees that basically all schools have to pay, and not are different than unforeseen fees, like Mia was saying, like travel, books, and such. So room and board, so if you're looking to live on campus, there's that breakdown too. So in addition to that, health insurance. So health insurance is by law required, but a lot of schools automatically put that on, so enroll students, but students have the option to waive that if they're already under their family's health or their parents' health insurance. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the total cost, and so you see what that cost would be. It looks like a scary number, but when thinking about scholarships and such, that number will go down.
Exactly. And so looking a little bit into what schools will put together as your need package, it encompasses multiple different things that are brought to you both by the institution, the college, the federal government, and then also state grants, local grants, things of that nature. So when you're thinking about this holistically, a scholarship is money that a college is giving to you, that an outside scholarship might be giving to you, an institution, perhaps a parent's employer. That's money that's given to you that you don't need to pay back. Similarly with grants, that's what we like to say is free money. So that will just go towards your education. No need to worry about that. And then there's loans. So when it comes to subsidized and unsubsidized loans, the federal government will give you up to $55,000 your first year, and then that increases each year as you go on. So they split those into two things called subsidized loans, which means those loans right off the bat, they don't accrue any interest. Oh, excuse me, they do accrue interest 6 months after you end school, versus unsubsidized loans, which will start the moment that you take out the loan. So that'll start accruing interest your first year should you take those loans out. And just to break down on this form a little bit more, Pell Grants and federal SEOG are federal grants that come from the government. And then grants can come both from either your institution or the government as well. So Simmons, we offer need-based grants rather than need-based scholarships. So each college is a little bit different. So that's how your financial aid packages might vary when you're looking at them.
Yeah, and these are empty because the numbers are so different that the merit scholarship and all the other loans and state grants can vary. So that's why it's blank. So we listed a number of financing options. I'm just going to touch upon a few that we've seen a lot. And some of them are the 529 plans. So those are typically money used that parents have been saving for their student to go to school. I also wanted to highlight a payment plan. So a lot of schools do provide payment plans. So when you do have a big number and it looks a lot like a lot, there are opportunities where you can pay by month if that's better for you, but they can vary dependent on the school by like 8 to 10 months, right?
Yep. Each school does things a little bit differently. Traditionally, I've worked at institutions that offer in increments of either 9 payments or 10 payments. It really depends on the college that you're looking at. So that big scary number of $25,000 due each at the beginning of each semester, you can break that down across the board. And similarly, it won't be that large number dependent on what your aid and scholarship package looks like.
Yeah, and once basically you sign up for the plan, you'll be fine. Your student will be fine to like continue in classes because you have signed up for that plan. But some plans do, depending on the school, have enrollment fees, which is like a one-time fee. But it really is dependent on the institution. So just make sure you're asking about those things. We also highlighted other loans that are available and that we have seen in the past. So
yeah. Especially looking at private loans, there's a lot of resources out there. Elm Select is something that we talk about at Simmons just as a reference. Many institutions have it on there. When you call and you ask your financial aid department, you know, what private loan students have taken out in the past, we never give a preference. What Elm Select does, it collects a bunch of data from our students in the past, I believe between 5 to 10 years out, with private loans that they've had success with. It has listed both their rates and how much they've taken out on the general course. So each institution has a little window into what their students are doing. So Select is a great reference and tool for that.
And one of our last topics is negotiation, which is very important. We highlighted a few points that we found to be essential when negotiating. So first and foremost, make sure you're asking for clarification because each institution is different. So if something doesn't make sense or you kind of need to hear it again because you just like want to kind of get a better understanding, it's okay to ask. And the financial aid advisors are really there to help you understand. So if there is something that you want more clarification on, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to say, hey, can you repeat this? Or maybe show me how this works in this sense and such. There is an appeal process. So there are appeal process available throughout institutions. So if you were awarded a merit-based or need-based scholarship that you feel isn't aligning with what you believe you should be getting, there are processes that you could follow through with your institution. Just make sure you ask, but they do exist. How much to spend? So we get that question a lot, like how much do we want to really invest in this? It's really a personal decision. Each family, each student is different. So whatever makes sense to you is really, like we say here, it's your own personal decision, and whatever you want to feel comfortable spending. And just be honest. So going back to how much do you want to spend? If you have, and we talked about non-negotiable things earlier, if you have a non-negotiable amount that you're looking for, lay out that expectation. Say, this is what I can do and this is what I want. And it's okay to stick to that and be honest, because maybe the school that you're really trying to push for isn't that right fit, and that's okay. So just really being honest with yourself and with your expectations, and lay it out and make sure that your financial aid advisor knows, essentially. So, and then we were going to mention something else. And just understanding that if you do take out loans and such, it does, the responsibility does fall on the student. So even though parents can sign off on taking loans, that really is going to end up being the responsibility of the student to pay off when they graduate, essentially. So that's also just important to remember and to think about when you're thinking about negotiating an amount that you want to spend.
No, that was a lot of information. We just threw at you in a lot of numbers. So any questions you have, we're more than happy to take right now.
Question. Right. So I am last, I believe.
Yes.
And I get the distinct pleasure of talking about students who are going into that senior spring, what you can continue to do now, thinking about how you can find support once you arrive on a college campus, and then also what role parents can play. And I think I can talk a little bit about what role parents can play in the college process, and then also what role folks can play once they're students or maybe a bit further. So I am from the University of Pennsylvania, and we are in Pennsylvania, which is not in the Virgin Islands. So I think we'll be talking a lot about sort of what that homesickness, that distance might look like as well. And my personal experience, while not in the Virgin Islands, was going to school very far from home. And so I can definitely relate to some of the things that families and that students might be thinking a little bit about here. So I think we'll start by talking a little bit about senior spring. I'm not sure how many seniors are in the room right now, but I think it can be very tempting as students are moving into their senior spring, your college applications are out the door, to begin to let foot off of the gas. And I think to some extent that can be a totally great option. That can be an opportunity for you to relax, get to reconnect with your friends. You've had a pretty busy fall semester applying to colleges, and to really take the opportunity to get that time to reconnect with folks, to spend time with your family. But it's not a time to forget that school is still important. And so when we send out application decisions for students, admission decisions, we always say that they're contingent on continued success. So make sure that you're continuing to get those homework assignments in, to be respectful and kind to your teachers, and all those things that you hope that as you're closing the door on your high school experience, that you're leaving that positive impression on your school community, so that when they speak about our university that you're at or something like that, they're like, oh, we've heard great things about blah, blah, blah. This student was so wonderful. Really leave that sort of nice lasting impression on your community, and also be nice to your counselors who are working really hard to make sure that students are getting through. As the role sort of process, one of the things that my boss always talks to parents about is thinking about how the college process in itself are the training tools that students need to be successful adults. So meeting deadlines, communicating with people they don't know very well, all of these tools are going to set students up to be a successful college students. And so we encourage parents to really let students guide that process, but recognizing that when it comes to things like financial aid, or when it comes to setting up some travel maybe that you may be doing, that we really, as parents, that's the time to really help to step in and guide those conversations. And I think there's a nice dovetail between what my colleagues at Simmons were talking about and this, about the role that students and parents can play together in financial aid, and making sure that you're letting your students as parents be part of that conversation, because college is a really big investment for everyone, and making sure that there's an understanding of what that investment looks like. Once students arrive in college, one of the biggest pieces of advice that they'll begin to hear is that they need to get comfortable asking for help. I think that as students are researching colleges, it can be really tempting to focus a lot on the glitz and the glamour of an institution, how many treadmills they have in their gym, do they have X, Y, and Z. But I think one of the things that we're really looking for And what you should be looking for in your college search is a college that's going to feel like a comfortable fit, where the support mechanisms are going to be in place to make you a successful student. And so I think that some students will have a name support that they need right away. When I was going to college, it was really important to me that I was going to be in a community where there are going to be people who had a shared experience that I had. And I grew up in a very agricultural community and ended up going to a college that was pretty different than that. But seeking those smaller communities was something that I was pretty intentional about in my college search. So whether that's a particular racial or religious organization that you want to be part of, those are things that you should be seeking in your college process, so that when you arrive on a college campus, you'll be able to find those communities that you want to be a part of. In addition, all colleges are going to have support mechanisms. Sometimes I use the analogy of thinking about Hogwarts. There's a very famous quote in Harry Potter. Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Harry Potter, says, "Help will always be granted at Hogwarts for those who ask for it." And the same is largely true at colleges. And so I think when students come into college environments, one of the best piece of advice that they can take is really to figure out, before they're in a situation where they desperately need something, what those support services are going to be, whether it's tutoring, whether it's counseling services, whether it's additional financial assistance that you may be seeking, whether it's study abroad, if that's something that's very important to you, figuring out who your academic advisor is. These are all the tools that can really make sure that when students are moving through their college experience, they have people there to support them. I think when going to college really far from home, it can feel like you're trying to build a new family around yourself. And while there will never be a college campus that can replace the family structure that's in place in your home, colleges are really willing to provide students with that entire support network. Those people who to cheer them on when they're successful, the people to push them when they're maybe being a little bit lazier. We have all of these resources on our campuses, and I think it's really helpful for students if they can really research those, both when they're researching colleges, but also in your senior spring. Maybe you have your offers on the table by April 1st. Begin to think about what those support mechanisms might be. And I think Penn is a wonderful institution, but if someone is looking for something, there are schools that do specific things better than we do, and vice versa. And so I think when we're thinking about making those college decisions, once you have your offers in hand, it can be really helpful to begin to not just think about sort of these fancy things, this really fun stuff, but what will campus be like on a day that isn't the most perfect, wonderful day, when you maybe do need a little bit of extra support. Homesickness is something that I was also asked to talk about. I think that students who travel far from school can experience homesickness, but I would also say that students who live in the city of Philadelphia and grew up here also experience homesickness with going to college. And I think that for every single student who goes to college globally, and I feel very comfortable saying this very bold statement, there are elements of this new college experience that make them feel uncomfortable. And so students are really well served when they can recognize that they are not the only people who are having this experience. And even the folks on campus who are coming from 15 minutes walking from where they are now living in a dorm room are going to experience a little bit of this change, a little bit of this homesickness. And there are on-campus resources. I think it's always great to reach out to counseling services to get information about how to combat homesickness or how to work through homesickness. Parents, as you may expect, are really great resources with homesickness. My advice is always to sort of set up some check-in times. I work a lot with our international students at Penn who are sometimes traveling, 15 hours or more to get to campus. And it's not going to be the kind of thing where you can check in every 15 to 20 minutes via text if your family is in Zimbabwe and you're in Philadelphia. And so I think sort of establishing a routine can really help students who are experiencing homesickness, and to really make sure that when students are navigating these challenges, that you're having that nice two-way dialogue. I think that's where parents, once students are on campus, can really help to set the tone. The other piece that I just was doing some research on for something else is just that family dynamics will change a little bit when one student goes to college and the other ones are left behind. And so really making sure that the family unit still has those communication opportunities can be really helpful to make sure that students make that transition. Academic advising is something that I think people often think is purely for academic pieces, but all of the faculty members on these campuses recognize that when they're working with first-year students in particular, they're going to need to be socio-emotional counseling to an extent as well. They're going to need to say, you know, you're not going to get 100% on every test that you take. You're not going to do everything perfectly all the time. And I think it's our job as institutions of higher education to sort of do all of that work for you. And so I think it can be really exciting as you're going through the college process. It feels maybe a little bit daunting or challenging. You know, you've heard about holistic review and about making the most of your time in high school, but there comes this moment for most students around sort of April and May of their senior year, where all the excitement becomes a lot of anxiousness. And I do think it's important to recognize and talk to your friends about that, because everyone is going to be experiencing that in your high school, but also everyone is going to be experiencing that regardless of where they're coming from. So that's kind of my little spiel, and I'm happy to take questions. And I'm sorry, my PowerPoint doesn't work.
Had a good night for technology. Does anybody have questions for Haley about this specific topic? I know, like, I think we have Isaiah here, but any questions about specifically or institutions that she represents or anything at all? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not specific to STEAM, but if she could talk a little bit about early decision and how that plays.
Sure. Haley, not sure if you heard that, but the question is, can you speak a little bit about early decision and then probably just everything else, early action RD especially too, and kind of what to consider in that regard?
Of course. My water. Yeah. So for folks who are, just to get a sense from you, this is folks 9th through 11th, 9th through 12th grade?
Yeah, at this point, what we have left are 11th graders, 10th graders, 9th, yes. Yeah, so all ages represented here.
Okay, great. So for whoever asked the question, you have maybe some knowledge not everyone else has. So when students apply to college in the States, there are generally a few sort of modes in which students apply. There is something called early decision, something called early action, something called regular decision, and something called rolling admission. And these are sort of the 4 essential timelines that are used in the college application process. So the first and sort of most recent is early decision. So what early decision means is that you pick one school that is your top school, that you've talked to your counselor about that school, you know it's going to be a good match for you. You've talked the financial realities of that school, knowing that if you are admitted to that school, that you will be attending. You're signing a contract with your counselor, with you as parents, and with you as students, saying that this is our agreed upon thing we've talked about, and if admitted, I will attend. Notified sometime before December time period, and are admitted if they're going to attend. We also have a process, not at Penn, at some of our peer institutions, called early action. And what early action means is you apply on that same timeline, you get in on the same timeline, but you're actually not bound to attend the institution. So for example, you apply early action, you get all those documents in by November 1st, you hear back on that same timeline, but you still have until the national candidates reply date, May 1, the day everyone has to make that college decision, to decide whether or not you're going to attend that institution. There's also something called regular admission. Regular admission is when students apply, usually in the very beginning of January. It will vary a little bit from school to school. And we'll, as an office, we'll have until March 30th, April 1st, review those applications. Regular decision really get to play the field. They will find out about all the schools they're admitted to, and they'll get to make that decision. There's also rolling admission, which essentially is when you apply when the application opens, and you can apply up until the class is full. Rolling admission is something that is changing always a little bit from year to year. And one of the schools that I knew best who did rolling admission stopped. So I don't have as good of an example, but there are a number of larger state institutions that still practice rolling admission. When students are applying early through either early action or early decision, one of three things can happen. First, they can be admitted, which is great. We hope that you'll consider buying a sweatshirt, or maybe in your case, at least for the time being, a t-shirt. And then you will wait until everyone else hears back, and then you'll get excited about coming to campus. Students who apply in those early rounds can also be deferred, and that means that we're still very interested in your application, but we want to see either the broader context of the pool or something more specifically from you. Sometimes it would mean we want to see some senior grades. Sometimes it might mean we want you to write us and tell us a little bit more about why you're interested in chemistry. We want to hear more information from you. And you can also be denied through those early rounds. So those are the three things. I think the other part of the question was surrounding sort of the decision to apply early and sort of advantages or disadvantages to that process. I think that at Penn, there's a statistical advantage to applying early decision. We admit about 6% overall, or about 6% in regular decision and about 16% in early decision. And so when you hear those two numbers, they're different numbers. I think there are a couple things to keep in mind there. You should always recognize that you should always apply when your application is its strongest. If you haven't started putting together your common application and it's the end of October, it doesn't matter how wonderful you are or how excited you are about your early decision school, you're probably not going to have had time to sort of curate and put together all the pieces of an application in the way that would make you happy in that shorter time frame. If you want your senior grades to be part of the conversation, perhaps you had a slower start to the beginning of high school, that might be a time to wait until regular decision. And then there's also the financial piece. At Penn and at most of your institutions, and frankly, most colleges across the country that offer need-based financial aid, that aid is going to be the same both early and regular decision. That said, sometimes for families who are doing those net price calculators and working on those different tools, you may be sort of right on the financial options to really do that negotiation. And that's something that makes much more sense to hold off until regular decision to do. I think sometimes folks will feel some pressure to apply early decision and know that at Penn and at many, many other institutions, we always make sure that we leave spots open in regular decision, recognizing that that is when the vast majority of students will feel most comfortable financially, most comfortable socially, and most comfortable in many other ways making that decision to apply.